Good morning, everybody. My name's Matt Smallbone, lead pastor of Church of the City in East Nashville. Thrilled to have the Sylvan Park folks with us in this season as well. I just want to begin by acknowledging just how difficult this week has been for our country. I'm looking forward to a time of worship where we can connect our hearts to the hurts that we experience, and then in a while chat about appropriate ways to respond to all of this. But before we begin, I do have an important update about the future of our modified worship gatherings, both in East Nashville and in Sylvan Park. This week we learnt that Metro Nashville Public Schools will be closed until at least fall break, which of course has implications for us meeting for worship in our school buildings, both in East Nashville and in Sylvan. Further, we learnt that schools will be reopening in phases, with the youngest students first, meaning our high school buildings, at the latest we know, may not be available until January 2021. I'm hoping we'll get access sooner, but we're making plans with that worst case scenario in mind. And then there was some good news. On Thursday, Mayor Cooper announced that we're moving to a modified phase 2 on September 1st. In this phase, it turns out that come September 1st, it will be possible to gather 125 socially distanced and mask-wearing folks inside a building for worship gatherings, as long as we don't exceed 1/3 capacity. So the good news is we can meet. The bad news is that we don't have access to a building on Sunday mornings. So the team got busy, devised a plan that, God willing, we will be able to execute on. And just keep in mind, all of this is subject to change if 2020 strikes again. Here's the plan. Beginning September 9 on Wednesday evenings, we're pivoting to a Wednesday night worship experience, live worship experience. On September 9 at 7 o'clock, we'll be holding a soft launch of a live worship experience at Hope Church in East Nashville. We'll be inviting community group leaders, and if there's room, some key volunteers from both Sylvan and East Nashville to attend that night. We're doing this so that we can make sure we have our safety protocols under control in a new building. We welcome feedback from those leaders who attend, and we'll make the necessary adjustments based on their experience. And then on Wednesday evening, September 16, we'll open up church to 125 people on a first-come, first-served basis. You'll need to reserve your spot through our website. This will go live at noon on Sundays for the following Wednesday. So after church on Sunday, you will jump online, book your ticket for the following Wednesday. And note, sadly for now, we'll be unable to offer KidCity in person, but KidCityFX will continue online after our Sunday morning stream. So sorry about that, kiddos. Know that the Roses and Miss Sarah are as devastated as you are, and we'll be working on Zoom chats and all of that. Pastor Charles in East Nashville is working on a plan for live in-person socially distanced student city gatherings starting on September 16. We'll have more details about all of that next week, including how we will proceed with that in Sylvan as well. Also know that we are actively looking for a space on Sunday morning, and as soon as something becomes available, we will pivot from Wednesday nights to Sunday morning gatherings. Man, it feels good to have some forward movement on in-person gatherings. Just know, from my experience and conversations with people who are going to churches that are meeting already, it's not gonna feel like the good old days just yet. As I study other churches that have reopened, I'm seeing a really slow build back to normal attendance. The services usually begin at about 30% of the attendance that was experienced before COVID, and the early adopters to church are usually folks with a higher risk of tolerance. So I want to say something to the 70% of folks with medium or low risk tolerance. We love you, we see you. No judgment from us. We'll continue to stream church on Sundays at 10 a.m. throughout the COVID era and likely forevermore. The content will be the same, so please feel no shame or pressure about not attending. I do want you to know that our team will work tirelessly at updating our safety protocols. We'll continue to enhance our plans to the point where I'm confident that this will be one of, if not the safest larger group gathering you could attend in our city. And I just want to say something to my friends with a high risk tolerance. Just know that the 70% will be more inclined to attend in the future if they know that measures like mask wearing and social distancing are all in place, but beyond that, the people are being cool about it. Now, sometimes loving your neighbor means being chill about wearing a mask, even if you think it's like asinine. I can see it both ways, but I'll be wearing my mask because one, and you need to know this, we can't rent this space if we don't. And second, I know from conversations I've had with people that if we don't, in this season, attendance will be limited to people with a higher tolerance of risk. And gosh, that would be a real shame, don't you think? We obviously want to include as many people as we can, and let me assure you, it's been a lonely year for people with a lower risk tolerance. I don't want church to be another space that excludes people with concerns. So that's the plan for the first part of the fall. We'll confirm all of these plans next week, but man, I can't wait. All right, let's pivot to worshiping Jesus. It's my honor to pray for you. Well, Jesus, it's been quite the year. And in this moment, I pray you'll help us connect our heart to the problems in our world and our nation. Jesus, we give you access to our hearts and ask you would do a deep healing work in us. Jesus, would you grow us in our ability to love people and love you? And for those who are willing, Holy Spirit, we hold our hands open, adopt an open posture, and say, Holy Spirit, would you fill us again? We ask this in your precious name. Amen.
Good morning and welcome everybody, Sylvan Park, East Nashville, wherever you're at. So grateful you're here. So we're going to begin together by singing. Let's just pray together. Loving God, we look to you. We thank you that you're here with us. We open up our hearts, God. We say yes to you this morning. Would you have your way? Let's sing this together. Let this place be an upper room where your people learn to wait. Let this house become holy ground where your children watch and pray. Oh, remind us today we are people of your presence, and let there be wonder, and let there be wonder in this place. Let there be worship, let there be worship for your name. Come, Holy Spirit, how we need your fire again. Let there be wonder, and let there be wonder. Yes, let there be wonder. We're in awe, we're in awe, and we fear your name, but we will not be afraid. For the King in his holiness is our Father and our friend. Oh, remind us today we are people of your presence, and let there be wonder, let there be wonder in this place. Let there be worship, let there be worship for your name. Come, Holy Spirit, how we need your fire again. So let there be wonder, let there be wonder. Is he not the God who parted the sea? Is he not the one who heals our disease? Is he not the source of all that we need? You're all that we need. Is he not the God who emptied the grave? Is he not the one who breaks every chain? Is he not the hope still with us today? You're with us today. Is he not the God who parted the sea? Is he not the one who heals our your fire again. Come, Holy Spirit. Come, Holy Spirit. How we need your fire again. Let there be wonder. Oh, let there be wonder. And I stand amazed in the presence of Jesus the Nazarene, and wonder how he could love me, a sinner condemned unclean. And I stand amazed. Yes, I stand amazed in the presence of Jesus the Nazarene, and wonder how he could love me, a sinner condemned unclean. We're singing how marvelous, how wonderful, and my song shall ever be. And how marvelous, how wonderful is my Savior's love for me. And he took my sin. Yes, he took my sin and my sorrow, and he made them his very own, and bore the burden to Calvary, and suffered and died along with sin. We're singing how marvelous, how wonderful.
Lord, we thank you so much for your great love. We thank you that you loved us first. We thank you that you pursue us day in and day out. We thank you that you never turn your back on us. I thank you that you pick us up when we're low. I thank you that your face is turned toward us. You see us, you hear us, you know us. And we find rest in that. We thank you for the gift of worship. And we thank you for technology in this season, for our churches and to unify the body. We love you so much. We thank you for what you're going to do. We look to you and we seek your face. And we all say, amen.
Morning, Kid City. Miss Sarah here with my friend Molly. Miss Dita and Mr. Thomas say hello. And my Sylvan Park friends, today is Mr. Thomas's birthday. So if you go to the park, I want you to give him a big air high five and yell happy birthday to him. Now, my friends in East, I am going to be at the park and I hope to see you there. But before then, stick around for KidCityFX. And after that, I will see you at the park. Bye, my friends.
Thanks so much, Sarah and Molly. We love seeing you guys every week. Good morning, Church of the City, Sylvan Park, and East Nashville. I'm Rachel Garrett. I'm the Director of Experience at the Sylvan Park Church.
And I am Charles Tolbert. I am the student pastor for our East Nashville congregation.
We just want to remind you that this is the point in the service where we receive the offering, so you can head to churchofthecity.com/give or cotc.com/give because we shortened it, and you'll be able to give online that way. If you prefer to send in a check, scroll down to that same webpage and you'll find our physical address at the bottom of our website, or you can open up your Church of the City app and select the Give tab and give there as well.
And I know that we continue to tell you guys this every single week, but we also want to remind you of our care ministry. If you go to cotc.com/care, it's a place where you can receive assistance for needs that you may have during this current season. 2020 is a wild one, you know, it really is. And we want to make sure that if you have a need that's in your life, we genuinely want to know about it and genuinely want to be able to support you in it, no matter how big or how small it is. And you can also request to pray with someone as well, which could be something that would be a blessing to you, and we would love to know how we can do that with you.
Yeah. After service today, from noon to 2, we are both meeting at a park in our neighborhood. So I think you guys are meeting at Shelby
Park, yeah.
And we're going to meet right across the street from Cone at Richland Park. And we are so excited to see you guys. Just want to give you a couple reminders. One of those being Hurricane Laura is kind of affecting the weather this weekend. And there may be a possibility that we need to cancel or postpone to a different week because of thunderstorms that are right now while we're filming 60% chance of this weekend. So just check our socials before you hop in the car to head over to the park today. That'll be the most updated information. That's both Instagram and Facebook will update in both places. And that's at COTC Sylvan Park and at COTC East Nash.
Yeah.
Just remember, bring a lunch if you want one, blanket or chair to sit on. And then also make sure you bring your mask with because we want to follow the guidelines that the city has set up for us.
And then also this evening, there's going to be a worship and prayer night at our Franklin Congregation Church. It's going to be at 7 o'clock. They're planning to do it outdoors on the lawn, but in case of weather, they can move it indoors as well. Once again, it's going to be socially distanced, encouraging people to please wear their mask. There'll be a time when our local pastors will get together and lead us. They're planning for it to be about 90 minutes for the service, but I think it could be a really awesome and rich time for people to get together, to worship, to pray, and just to be encouraged as we head into the month of September, which is right around the corner.
And that's all the announcements that we have for you this morning. So we're going to hear from Pastor Matt Smallbone in just a moment. But before we do, by the time this airs in real time, I'm already on my second, sometimes third cup of coffee, depending on how the morning's going. Yeah. One of the things that I miss the most from being in person with you guys is seeing you in the hallway when we're all before service congregating around the coffee bar. So why don't you text somebody that you missed this morning, send them a little coffee emoji and just say, would really love to grab coffee with you soon. And we'll be back in just a moment.
Well, I'm thrilled to welcome my good mate, Pastor Curtis Zackery, to share with us this morning. We actually filmed CZ's talk earlier on, and has happened numerous times this year. In the gap between filming and streaming church, our country has been engulfed in another crisis, this time centered in Wisconsin. And again, the intermingling issues of racism and policing have exploded into another international headline, and another American city is racked with violence. It's been an extraordinary week. And in a peaceful response like nothing I've ever seen in my time, the players of the NBA and other professional sports just stopped playing, grabbed our attention. These are remarkable times that we're living in. And again, we sit here and with broken hearts, we have to ask, what can we do? You know, as you read through the New Testament, there are some things that become clear about what it means and what it doesn't mean to follow Jesus. For example, you can't be greedy and follow Jesus. Luke 12 shows that those two things just can't coexist. Or how about Matthew 18? Here you read that being an unforgiving Christian is an oxymoron. In Matthew 25, you read that you can't follow Jesus and not care about the poor, the oppressed, and the marginalized. And Ephesians 2, written by Paul, points out that you can't be ethnocentric, let alone racist, and follow Jesus. Ephesians 2 says this: "For he himself is our peace, who has made the two groups one, has destroyed the barrier, the dividing wall of hostility, by setting aside in his flesh the law with its commands and regulations. His purpose was to create in himself one new humanity out of the two, thus making peace, and in one body to reconcile both of them to God through the cross, by which he put to death their hostility. He came and preached peace to you who are far away, and peace to those who are near. For through him we both have access to the Father by one Spirit. Consequently, you are no longer foreigners and strangers, but fellow citizens with God's people and also members of his household, built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets, with Christ Jesus himself as the chief cornerstone." Now, what's happening here is Paul is unpacking some first century racism that existed between Jews and Gentiles. And he says that the work of the cross destroyed this barrier, that we are now members of the same household, meaning that when one of us is bleeding, our family is bleeding. And that's why this hurts so much, because these are deep family issues. And deep family issues just cut so deep. Listen, as followers of Jesus, when people are hurting and marginalized, our job is to run toward it, to show a deep compassion. And biblical compassion is radical. Biblical compassion literally means to suffer together. Now, to that end, I just want to be clear that Church of the City is 100% anti-racism. And as part of that, as individuals, you'll often be asked to search your heart for sin, including any hint of racism, both explicit and implicit, and confess it to someone. And then the expectation from the church will be that you'll make progress in this area, because it just doesn't align with the way of Jesus. For some of us, nothing else can be done until we look at our hearts and go, I have some racist ideas and behaviors that I picked up along the way. And we just say that out loud to someone and we confess it. That would be a brave and right thing for you to do. But I also know that you and I doing our inner work, while vitally important, isn't a complete response to racism. Rather, that's a starting point. It's important, but it's a starting point. Someone's thoughts on an issue must be transformed into action, or as we say, what you do is what you believe. Everything else is talk. So I'm aware that beyond teaching through this as well as I possibly can and engaging in spiritual practices for us to root out any sin in our own hearts, I know that we have to organize a long-term church response to racism that isn't dictated by the ebbs and flows of the news cycle, but it's systematically part of who we are as a church. So to that end, I want to update you with some things that are currently being built into the DNA of our church. In September, and in the final quarter of this year, we're launching the Advisory Council for Race, Justice and Reconciliation. This council will be guiding and advising our Tennessee churches through issues of race, holding us accountable to ensuring that this remains a priority. Right now, the council is in its early stages, organizing into subgroups that will address education, reconciliation, and action. And you'll be hearing more soon about the ways that you can actively participate. Racial disparity and injustice surface in many ways, and as a church, we're committed to a gospel-centered approach towards activism when and where our brothers and sisters need it the most. We'll do all we can within our influence to act on their behalf. I'm learning that for a local church, our influence is greatest where we live, in our city, engaging with Davidson County issues. I'm not interested in being a church with a low information to action ratio, but I want us to leverage our assets of time, talent, and treasure to make a difference in our neighborhoods, in the places where we have agency for creating real change. Now, to that end, both East Nashville and Sylvan Park have unleashed an army of tutors and readers, collected thousands of books, read books digitally to help out with the current educational challenges that disproportionately impact low-income and minority families in our city. I'm super proud of everyone's efforts on that. Another thing, you may not be aware of this, but a portion of every offering that is donated to church is contributed to our missional partnerships. We have over 20 of these organizations, many are doing great work in this space. My personal favorite is Corner to Corner. These guys are literally changing the trajectory of Black lives in our city. In fact, they're helping educate and empower more minority entrepreneurs than anywhere else and anyone else in Middle Tennessee. Every time you give, part of that money goes to them. And there's something else about these guys, which you may or may not know. Their building, Corner to Corner's office space, was destroyed in the tornado, and we've had the real honor of being able to share our East Nashville office space with them free of charge since March. And it's only possible because of your continued generosity. Now, of course, none of this is enough. But I want you to know that we are readjusting our culture and our priorities so that we can settle in for the long haul. All right, guys, I love you. I am with you in this difficult season. I now want to hand over to Pastor CZ to continue our series, Red Letters for a Chaotic World.
What is up, East Nashville and Sylvan Park? It has been far too long since I've had the chance to open the Word with you all, and I've been prayerful for both of these communities because of my deep affection for all of you. I'm so thankful for the investment that you all have given to me and to our immediate family. Just the way that you love us so well is always coming to mind. So it's always a privilege to me to have the chance to be able to return a favor of service in that I get a chance to open the Word with you. And today, I'm excited to look at the words of Jesus, which are calming in these chaotic times, as we're seeing in these red letters. And the words that we'll look at today aren't necessarily a directed statement. They're more of a question. And the question that we'll see is found in the book of Mark, chapter 8. The story that we're going to jump right into is one that might be less familiar than another one that sounds kind of like it. You know, a lot of us know about how Jesus fed 5,000 people, and there was a little boy who brought his lunch, and Jesus took that lunch and turned it into a miracle that fed thousands. And we know about that story. It's very familiar to us. Hopefully we know that there's another instance where Jesus feeds thousands of people again, and that's in Mark chapter 8. And when we look at this story today, it's going to start us on this little trajectory of a journey to see what Jesus wants us to know about himself, and more importantly, how knowing this truth about Jesus informs the way that we live on earth right now. Now, a lot of times when we're looking at the scriptures, we are looking at the characters in a story and we're asking God to reveal his character to us. And I want to hone in on one specific group of people today. It's the disciples. The disciples who we know have spent their lives following Jesus as he has preached beautiful, eloquent, incredible messages about the coming kingdom. This group of people, the disciples who have seen Jesus perform miracles right before their eyes. This group of people, the disciples, I believe, will be the grid by which we will measure our lives, and we will see the example of how they respond to this question that we will get to in Mark 8. I want to just start by reading at the beginning of the chapter and kind of take us through to where we'll arrive at our resolution. In verse 1 of Mark 8, it says, "In those days when again a great crowd had gathered, and they had nothing to eat, he called his disciples to him, and he said to them, 'I have compassion on the crowd because they have been with me now 3 days and have nothing to eat. And if I send them away hungry to their homes, they will faint on the way. And some of them have come from far away.'" So Jesus has started to make his way through the towns and villages, and the people are starting to spread the rumors that Jesus is coming through. They're passing word amongst the houses saying, "Have you heard? He's coming. I can't believe it." And they're running from house to house, and people are peeking out their windows, and Jesus is making his way with his followers. And what we start to see laid out here is that there's a group of people who have now accumulated together. They've started to follow Jesus on this journey. And it says that he gets to a place where he lands and the people sit down and he begins to preach. That's right, Jesus is preaching for 3 days straight. And the people who heard Jesus was coming dropped everything so that they could be where he was. The thing that's so amazing about this is they were probably taking care of other matters. They had things going on in their lives, but at the very sight of Jesus, at the word that Jesus was coming through, they dropped everything, and they knew if they could just get to Jesus, Jesus could change everything. So they follow Jesus to this place where he's preaching, and for 3 days, he's delivering these messages about the kingdom of God. And these people were there hungry and thirsty, not only for the things that Jesus has to say, but Jesus goes on to say they're actually physically hungry and thirsty. Jesus tells his disciples, this group of people has dropped everything and come to hear me teach. We need to feed them. And it says that he felt compassion toward these people. Now let's look at what this group of people, the disciples who we're tracking with, have to say about what Jesus proposes that they do for these people. Remember, Jesus says we need to feed these folks. Well, look at what it says in verse 4. The disciples answered him, "How can one feed these people with bread here in this desolate place?" Now, I just want to stop for a second because I don't know if you remember what I started out by saying. There was another time where Jesus and this group of disciples fed 5,000 people. That's right. This same group of disciples had seen Jesus already do this. But now, when Jesus proposes that they do it again for this group of people, he turns to the disciples and they say to him, "But how are we going to do this?" I know you might be asking the question like I am, why don't the disciples just think about how it happened last time? Well, Jesus, in his graciousness, continues on with the conversation in verse 5. It says, he asked them, "How many loaves do you have?" And they said, 7. And he directed the crowd to sit down on the ground. And he took the 7 loaves, and having given thanks, he broke them and gave them to the disciples to set before the people. And he set them before the crowd. And they had a few small fish. And having blessed them, he said that these also should be set before them. And they ate and were satisfied. And they took up the broken pieces left over, 7 baskets full. Verse 9 says, and there were about 4,000 people, and he sent them away. And immediately he got into the boat with his disciples, and he went to the district of Dalmanutha. So just a quick recap. We got Jesus preaching to a group of people who have come because they know if they can get near the man Jesus, Jesus can change Everything. They've dropped everything because they know that what he has to offer is more important than anything that they could be focused on in the moment. So they go and they sit and they listen. And it says Jesus feels compassion on them. And he says to his disciples, we need to feed the people. And they get these 7 loaves of bread, break them up. There's a couple of fish lying around. They bless them. They feed thousands again. The disciples see the way that Jesus is able to do a miracle with limited resources. He takes 7 loaves of bread and has enough to where there's leftovers again. So once this is finished, it says that they pack up and they head out on a boat to a place called Dalmanutha. All right. So this is the first section of our story. Remember, we're tracking with the disciples, this group of people who are with Jesus, and we want to see their response to what's happening. So let's jump into the second part in verse 11. It says that the Pharisees came and began to argue with him, seeking from him a sign from heaven to test him. This is something that I think many of us can relate to. This impulse that we have to try to figure out ways to test to see if God is really who he says he is. These people, these Pharisees, have approached Jesus and they're asking Jesus. No. They're demanding of Jesus that he give them a miracle. Now, I need to pause for a second and show you the difference between the 2 groups of people that we've witnessed so far. So the first one, this group of people who left everything and they believed that Jesus had something to offer. They dropped what they were doing to listen to Jesus. They came to Jesus believing without seeing anything. I think this is why Jesus feels compassion on them. That first group of people who have come and sat for 3 days ready for Jesus to do whatever he's going to do. They get there and they say, if Jesus is going to be with us, then Jesus can change everything. They came believing without seeing. And Jesus does a miracle. He feeds 4,000 people. Now they get on this boat, they go to the other side. Here's another group of people. And this other group of people, they demand that Jesus does a miracle so that it will affirm these claims that he's making about who he really is. The Pharisees, who have determined their own way of righteousness, they are the ones who have said, we know the best path toward following God. And if you follow the rules and the laws that we have determined and we have established, you will be okay. This man, Jesus, has come to upset everything that we have established. If he really is who he says he is, he needs to prove to us that it's true. So the first group came believing without seeing. What we see about this second group is that they needed to see in order to believe. Now we know how Jesus responded to the first group. He felt compassion when he saw their faith and he gave them a miracle. How does he respond to this second group? Well, verse 12 says, he sighed deeply in his spirit and said, why does this generation seek a sign? Truly I say to you, no sign will be given to this generation. And he left them, got into the boat again, and went to the other side. Wow, this is a way different response from Jesus. The group who believed without seeing received Jesus' compassion, and he gave them a miracle. This group, which is so sure of itself, demands of Jesus that they see in order to believe. And he says, no, this is not how it works. This generation demands a sign, and no sign will be given. There needs to be some faith. I also love how in verse 12 it shows a side of Jesus' humanity. And I don't know if this makes you feel any better about some of the ways that you've responded in different confrontations. You know, in verse 12 it says, Jesus sighed deeply in his spirit. Have you ever been at an interchange with someone in some intense fellowship and you just feel so frustrated that you just, Well, that's what it says we see here in Jesus' response. But I love how Jesus is so direct to say you need to believe without seeing. And he tells his disciples, let's get back on the boat and go again. Now, I've taken us through the story so far, starting in verse 1 all the way down here to verse 13. There's two groups of people that are responding to Jesus' presence. The one that we're tracking with the whole time is the disciples. So the disciples were there when Jesus fed the 4,000. And the disciples were there when he has this interchange with the Pharisees. What's interesting is this group, the disciples, will now be confronted with their own chance to see how they will interact with Jesus when it comes to their own challenge in their lives. In verse 14, it says, now they had forgotten to bring bread, and they had only one loaf with them in the boat. So this is ironic, isn't it? Right? Jesus had just done a miracle with bread only a few verses before where we're reading. Also, remember, this group, the disciples, saw Jesus do a miracle with bread before. Now the disciples themselves find themselves at a bread deficiency. They have only one loaf, and that's not enough to feed all of them. Now, wouldn't you think that this group of guys who saw Jesus just feed 4,000 and saw Jesus respond with compassion to people who believed without seeing, this group who also saw Jesus deal with the Pharisees who demanded a miracle and said, no, you need to believe without seeing. Wouldn't you think that this group of disciples would just turn to Jesus, the miracle bread maker, and say, hey man, can you take this bread and chop it up and do your bread miracle thing because we ain't got enough to eat? Can you hook us up here? You would think that these disciples would turn to Jesus. But in verse 15, Jesus recognizes that that's not their impulse. Their impulse, rather than turning to the one who is the source of the miracle that they need, is rather to start looking at one another and saying, whose fault is it? Who should have brought the bread? And how are we going to fix it? Their impulse, rather than turning to the one who is the source of the life and the restoration that is supernatural for the thing that is in front of them, have turned to their own human understanding. They have leaned on the resources that are contained within themselves. Jesus recognizes this impulse and he says this in verse 15. Watch out. Beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod. And it says in verse 16, and they began discussing with one another the fact that they had no bread. Now, you might, just like the disciples, be wondering, what is Jesus talking about when he says, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod? Maybe this is why they ignored him and went right back to the discussion of how they were going to handle this whole bread thing. Well, the first thing Jesus was trying to point out to them is this idea of leaven is important to pay attention to. Now, we're talking about bread, and that's how brilliant Jesus is. He uses a metaphor here that is pertaining to the very thing that they're discussing. Now, what does leaven do? Any of you bakers will know that it's like yeast. It will make the bread rise. And he's saying you need to pay attention to the yeast, to the leaven that is like the Pharisees. Now, what could he be referring to? Now, remember, they just had an interchange with these Pharisees, and these Pharisees were so certain in their own abilities, their own strength, their own ideas, their own thoughts, their own chance to be able to earn righteousness. So when Jesus is warning his disciples, he says, beware of thinking like the Pharisees, that it's up to you in your own strength to bring resolution to the problems in your life. The second thing he says to them is, beware of the leaven of Herod. Now, who's Herod? We talk a lot about Herod when it's Christmas time, right? We know that Herod at this time was the king of the Jews. Well, who is Jesus? He's the capital K, King of the Jews. What Jesus is warning his disciples is for them not to think according to the kingdom of this world, the rules and the bounds and the laws of this world. You're thinking only in terms of how things can be resolved according to this world. That as a leaven, that as something that makes your bread rise will never get you what you are hoping for. So he warns them, don't think according to your own effort. Don't think according to the bounds of this kingdom. There's a kingdom that I am king over that is not of this world. But when Jesus sees them immediately turn back to the discussion of bread and whose fault it is and how we're going to fix it, he begins to have some words for them in verse 17. Jesus, aware of this, said to them, why are you discussing the fact that you have no bread? Do you not yet perceive or understand? Are your hearts hardened? Having eyes, do you not see? And having ears, do you not hear? And do you not remember? Now, Jesus really kicks it up a notch here because you can tell he would have hoped that when he gave them that little warning about the leaven, the warning about not being like the Pharisees, not thinking according to the kingdom of Herod, he would have thought that they would have responded because these disciples were with him when he fed the 4,000. The disciples were with him when he interacted with the Pharisees. He would have thought that they would get it. And he asked them the question, do you not remember what we have done? And then he goes on to be way more articulate. In verse 19, when I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000, how many baskets full of broken pieces did you take up? And they said to him, 12. And the 7 for the 4,000, how many baskets full of broken pieces did you take up? And they said to him, 7. So Jesus starts to break it all the way down. He says, we fed 5,000 people one time with the thing that you're arguing about, bread. And when we did that, how much did we have left over? I love the numerology of this because it says there were 12 baskets left over the first time. That means there was 1 basket full for every one of the disciples to have a direct reminder of the provision and the power and the glory of God. Then the second time he says, we fed 4,000 and you guys gave me 7 loaves of bread. How many were left over? How many baskets full were left over? And they said 7. So that means there was 1 basket full left over that represented every one of the loaves that they were probably trying to hold on to take care of themselves rather than other people. But now we get to the question that we started out talking about in the very beginning. The words that are calming in these chaotic times. This question that is posed of the disciples. And I think this question can change the way that we engage the days that we are living in right now. So we remember there was a group who believed without seeing. There's another group who needed to see in order to believe. The disciples saw both of those groups. The disciples themselves are now challenged with a chance to respond. And here is the question Jesus has for them in verse 21. Jesus said, do you not yet understand? Do you not yet understand? We talked about this whole story till this point in the book of Mark chapter 8. And we get to this question that Jesus is asking of the disciples because I believe that this question can shape and form the difference between what life looks like for us internally as we engage life around us in 2020. This question can help us to live in a way that is from a place of connectedness to God rather than flailing and trying to figure out things on our own. The reason Jesus asks this question of this group of people called the disciples is because he wants to know if they get the distinction between knowing and understanding. See, the one thing that is unquestionable in this story is whether or not the disciples knew Jesus had the power to do a miracle. Of course they knew. They saw it with their own eyes. They knew what Jesus could do because they had witnessed him over and over and over again perform miracles. They knew because they, in their own perception, were able to see what Jesus could do. They knew in their heads his power. But the question Jesus is asking is not connecting to the head knowledge of whether or not he could do it. It's the understanding of his true power and what it really means to rely on him. Knowing and understanding can be different things. To know in our heads and to understand in our hearts can be completely different in their representation. I want to just go a little bit further in the story before we finish our time because I want us to see how important this was to Jesus to bring forward before this group of people. It says in verse 22, they came to Bethsaida, and some people brought to him a blind man and begged him to touch him. And he took the blind man by the hand and he led him out of the village. And when he had spit on his eyes and laid his hands on him, he asked him, "Do you see anything?" So right after this question is asked of the disciples, do you understand? We don't see an answer in the text. So I feel like what we're about to see is continuing this same conversation. They end up in this place called Bethsaida. They bring to Jesus a man who is blind, and Jesus grabs the blind man by the hand. He leads him outside of the village, and now he and the disciples are there with him. The thing we need to know about the importance of this interchange here is the group of people who brought Jesus the blind man aren't even about to get to see him get healed. Jesus has a different group of people that he wants to point out some specific things to, and it's this group called the disciples. He brings the blind man outside of the town. He spits on his eyes, touches him, and asks him a very important question. Do you see anything? Verse 24, it says, he looked up and said, "I see men, and they look like trees walking." And then it says in verse 25, then Jesus laid his hands on his eyes again, and he opened his eyes. His sight was restored, and he saw everything clearly. And he sent him home, saying, "Do not even enter the village." Now, I don't know about you, but I got some questions. Question number one is, what happened to Jesus's healer, man? Like, did his healer get broken? Is he too tired to be able to do it the right way? I don't know if you guys caught this, but in the story, this blind man is touched by Jesus, and the first time the man says, "I can see, but I can only kind of see." And even though I kind of see, everything is really distorted. I see men, and they look like tall trees. I can't really see clearly. Then it says that Jesus touches him again, and he's completely healed. So our first question, is Jesus' healer broken? Is this something that Jesus couldn't pull off with his strength the first time? No, friends. Who is he trying to show a very specific lesson to? The disciples. The disciples who were just asked, "Do you not yet understand?" There was no answer. This blind man is partially healed. And when he asks him, "Can you see anything?" he says, "I can kind of see." Then Jesus touches him again and he says, "I see clearly." The second question is, Why did he tell them, don't even enter the village? Why doesn't he just say, go and tell everyone that you've been healed? He says, go, you're healed, you're good. Don't even worry about going back to the village. It's because he wanted these disciples to get the message more than anyone else. The most important thing was that this group, the disciples, got what Jesus was saying. And this is where I want to just land us today and bringing us to the awareness of how this question, in the midst of these chaotic times, can change the way that we live. See, the disciples who were with Jesus, spent time with him, witnessed his miracles, actually took part in some of the miracles, when they were confronted themselves with a challenge, decided rather than turning to Jesus to focus on their own strength, their own ability, and their own ability to assess the reason why behind what was going on. And what Jesus was trying to get this group of people who knew in their heads his power is that when they are confronted with these challenges that are right in their faces with a resolution that does not feel like it's possible, not to turn to their knowledge, but to turn to the understanding of who Jesus really was. When this blind man is healed only part way, then fully healed, he's showing the disciples, you can kind of see what's going on because you know in your heads about my power, but one day you'll fully understand who I really am. I think what I'm finding myself turning to in these days that feel so confusing when it comes to every issue that we find ourselves engaged with in social media or on the news or in conversation. I find myself turning to what I know in my head to be true about God. And I even start thinking about what I know to be true about God in my head. And I start saying things like, yes, because God is who I think he is, he could probably do something about what's going on. And yeah, because I know God has the power to do this, he probably could do something. And what I find myself doing is giving God just a placeholder in the part of the story because I know it's important for him to have one. But in reality, I'm not truly turning to God with all that I have, trusting him to be the resolution for what I need. I think too often we're leaning on our own knowledge. We're leaning on the resolution being connected to our ability to figure things out. When Jesus was on the boat with those disciples, he asked them the question, do you not understand? Rather than us remaining focused on how we, in our own knowledge, can explain things that are going on around us, we need to be completely and totally submitted with everything that we have, dependent upon God by his Spirit to move in ways that we could never do in our human strength. Now, I know that sounds so crazy and so churchy, maybe to some of you, but the thing that I have come to know and understand is that Jesus, even with his own disciples, knew that we human beings have the tendency to include just enough God in our conversation, that we keep him around as an ally and as a friend, but we don't turn with desperation, with all that we have, to the invitation of his power by his Spirit in a way that maybe we don't understand in our human understanding. He's asking us, do you not yet understand? I think when this blind man sees in part, it's completely convicting to me because I know enough about reading the Bible and hanging out around church people and talking about Jesus that he has some power and he's done some things. I know a lot of stories about what has happened in the past. I know a lot of Bible verses by heart. I know a lot of things that I have shared myself when it comes to who Jesus is, but it's different when you move from knowing to understanding. The complete and total dependence that unless God shows up, this is not going to work. So in our final moments together, I just want to take some time to share the Lord's table. If you have your elements, I just want you to grab them wherever you're at. And I want you to think about what this bread represents. When you physically interact with this bread, it's a representation of the broken body given by God so that we, who are longing for hope and reconciliation with God, can have it. It's through Jesus' work on the cross that any of us could ever have hope moving forward into the future. And when I think about what this bread represents, I know what it means in my head. But I want to understand in my heart every single day that it means salvation, rescue, and restoration. On the night when Jesus was betrayed, he took a piece of bread. And he said, "This is my body, which has been given for you. Whenever you eat of the bread, do this in remembrance of me." Let's eat together. Same night, Jesus took a cup. And this cup, which was filled with the drink that represented the shed blood of Jesus. This blood that brings wholeness, renewal. This blood which pays for the sin that I could never pay for myself. He says, whenever you drink of this cup, do this in remembrance of me. Let's drink together. The question that Jesus asks, do you not yet understand? Moves us from our head to our hearts. Moves us from the ideas of who God is to becoming fully dependent on the fact that we need God to move on our behalf in ways that we never could in our humanity.
Thank you, CZ. My hope is that I'm about to see some of you at the park at noon and some more of you tonight at Church of the City Franklin for an evening of outdoor prayer and worship. If you think weather is an issue, and at the time of filming, thunderstorms were a 60% possibility, please check out our socials before you jump into the car. But I hope I'm about to see you all very soon. Love you guys. Up next is KidCityFX.
celebrate the fact that our life is in Christ and He is alive today. So let's sing this together. Here we go. See the tomb where He laid. See the stone rolled away. He is risen. He is risen. He's alive. See His hands. See His feet. Touch His scars. He's alive. He lives. All honor and power are His. All glory forever. Amen. Jesus lives. Yeah. Hear the shackles breaking free. Hear the song of the redeemed. He is moving. He is moving. He's alive. Oh, so take His freedom, take His love. Can you feel it rising up? He is here. He is here. He's alive. Oh, He lives. All honor and power are His. All glory forever. Amen. Jesus lives. All honor and power are His. All glory forever. Amen. Oh, Jesus lives. Oh, You took all our shame, left it in the grave. We're forgiven. Oh, we're forgiven. The work forever done, only by the blood. It is finished. Oh, it is finished. Oh, You took all our shame, left it in the grave. We're forgiven. Oh, we're forgiven. The work forever done, only by the blood. It is finished. Oh, it is finished. Oh, He lives. All honor and power are His. All glory forever. Jesus, oh, He lives. All honor and power are His. All glory forever. Amen. Jesus lives. Oh, Jesus lives.
Hey guys, we are so excited you're back with us for another KidCityFX. Today we are talking about something really exciting. Do you know what it is? It's seeds. Yeah, like the really tiny things that like really big things grow from. And I know what you're probably thinking to yourself, Maggie, there's a Bible story about seeds. And there's actually not just one Bible story, there's a bunch of them. So today we're going to put your seed knowledge to the test with a little game we're going to play. Now, you guys already know the drill. Make sure your whole family can see the screen, and then get ready to guess. You guys ready? Let's mix it up. Okay, guys, here's how it's gonna work. You're gonna see a picture of a seed come up on your screen, and you're gonna have 3 options. You'll have to guess what the seed makes. Does that make sense? All right, you think you guys are ready? Okay, the first one is either a mango, an avocado, or a pumpkin. What do you guys think it is? The answer is a pumpkin. How crazy is that? All right, the next one is either a cucumber, watermelon, or an apple. What do you guys think? The answer is watermelon. Are you guys doing good? Okay, let's keep going. Either a tomato, green bean, or squash. What do you guys think? The answer is tomato. All right, let's keep it rolling. Here we go. Don't be afraid to ask your parents to help because they've probably seen a lot more seeds than you have. All right, you ready for the next one? Okay, it's either beets, coconut, or sunflower. What do you guys think? It's a sunflower, which, by the way, are my favorite type of flowers. Okay, the next one is either a kiwi, banana, or an apple. What do you guys think it is? It's an apple. All right, here we go. This is the last one. Okay, get your thinking caps on. Here we go. It's either corn, zucchini, or a potato. It's zucchini. All right, how'd you guys do? Did you get most of those right? Isn't it crazy how such small things can produce such huge fruits and vegetables and plants and stuff? It's crazy, right? When seeds are planted, they grow things. That's just how it works. Jesus wanted his disciples to know that. So he told them a story all about seeds. You guys ready? Listen in.
Kid City, hello! I am so excited to be back with you. My goodness, we have learned so much about Jesus over the past 6 weeks, and we are about to learn more today. But before we do, let's try to recap a little bit, just a little Bible trivia. You ready? Okay, get your thinking caps on. The Bible is separated into 2 parts. Do you remember what 2 parts they are? The Old Testament and the New Testament. Do you remember? That word testament, it's a big word. It's kind of like a promise or a covenant, kind of like old promise and new promise, but they both are so important. So we've got the Old Testament and the New Testament. Now let's see if we can remember how many books are in the entire Bible. Remember, the Bible is like a library of books all in one. How many, can you remember, are in the Bible? 66. That's right. There are 66 books in the entire Bible. Do you remember how many are in the Old Testament? 39. And who's really good at math? That makes 27 in the New Testament. So 39 in the Old Testament, 27 in the New Testament. It's fun to learn little facts about the Bible. It helps us simplify a little bit something that seems really big and hard, but we are learning together. Okay, so we have our 2 parts, old and new. We've got our 66 books. Our stories over the past 6 weeks have been in the New Testament, in the first 4 books of the New Testament. Do you remember what those first 4 books are? Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Now, those 4 books are called something. Do you know what they're called? They kind of are all grouped together, and we call them something. I'll give you a hint. The G starts with the G. The Gospels, that's right. Do you know what gospel means? Gospel means good news. It means good news. It's good news because the Old Testament, that old promise, well, there was a promise of one to come. And he came. And that story is found in those first 4 books. And our story today is found in the first one. Do you remember? We just said what it was. It's Matthew. Our story today is from the book of Matthew, chapter 13. Say 13. 13. When we repeat things, it just helps us remember. It kind of like sticks in our brain. So our story in Matthew 13 is a parable. Now, that's a big word. What is parable? A parable is just simply a story. Jesus taught in parables. He would teach telling stories because it helped simplify this big idea. He would tell his disciples and those who followed him these stories, these parables, and it would take really big kingdom ideas of love and kindness and how to spend your money and simplify them into story form. Well, I love stories. Do you love stories? I love to read stories and watch stories. Like when you're watching a movie, you're watching a story. I like to hear stories. We all do. And Jesus told stories. He told parables for people to better understand what his kingdom is like. Well, this parable in Matthew chapter 13 is about a sower. A sower. What comes to mind? What comes to mind when you hear the word sow? I know I think of a needle and thread, like when you sew something, but that's S-E-W. This story, the word sow is S-O-W. When you sow something, S-O-W, you're scattering seed. Our story, Jesus tells today, is about a sower. So we know what sow is when you scatter seed. Who might the sower be? Think about that. The one who scatters the seed. So this parable of the sower who scatters seed is going to teach us something, a big idea about the kingdom of God. Before we jump into the story, I want you to understand the story a little bit. So I want you to use your imagination that God gave you, and I want you to picture a garden. Can you picture a garden in your mind? What do you see? Where is your garden? Is it on the top of a mountain? Is it in water? Where is it? Is it on the road? No. Gardens are often planted in what? In dirt, in soil. Well, this parable is about different types of soil or different places that seed is put. So in your mind, if you are the sower or the gardener, and you are going to sow your seed, you're going to scatter your seed, where's the best place to put it? In soil. Well, our story today is seed that is scattered on the ground, seed that is scattered in some rocks, seed that is scattered, where else is it scattered? Among thorns, and seed that is scattered in soil. We're going to hear this story right now. Before we do, I want you to picture in your mind your garden, and I want you to picture your plants growing up big. And I want you to think of the ground that it's sowed in. Okay, you ready for this? You ready for the story? So Jesus sat down in a boat, and the people stood on the shore as he told this story, and he said, a sower went out to sow. Now you know what this means. The gardener went out to scatter seed. A sower went out to sow, and as he scattered the seed, do you see it? As he scattered the seed, he kind of flung it. Well, when you scatter seed, it kind of goes everywhere, doesn't it? A sower went out to sow, and some seed fell onto a path, like a road. Are seeds going to grow on a road? No. In fact, they didn't. When the seeds fell on the path, the birds came and they had lunch. While other seeds fell among some rocks. Can seeds grow on rocky ground? Well, they can, but the soil wasn't very deep. Jesus explained when the seed scattered lands on some rocks, the sun caused the seed to open up and the plant sprouted, but then it burned quickly. And because the plant wasn't rooted in deep soil, it died. Well, other seed fell among some thorns, and the thorns, like weeds, choked out the plant when it tried to grow, because weeds grow wild. Other seed fell among the dirt. Can you picture the garden in your mind? That's where your garden is, in soil. You don't plant your cabbages and your cucumbers and your tomatoes and your beans among rocks and seed. You plant it in soil. And Jesus explained when the seed was planted in soil, it took root, and grain grew and it multiplied, and there was great produce. This parable is tricky and it can be hard to understand, but I think you can do it. The seed that fell among the path is kind of like when we hear God's word. So the seed, being God's word, when it lands on the path, it's like somebody who hears the truth, the gospel, the message of Jesus, the truth about the kingdom, and the enemy comes and snatches it away. Remember the birds that ate the seed quickly? It's just like that. The enemy will come and snatch away the truth, and you won't remember it. Well, the seed that was scattered among the rocks, that's like somebody who hears the truth about Jesus and the gospel, and they get excited and they're full of joy, and that plant grows up quickly. But do you remember what happened to the seed that fell among the rocks? It didn't root very deep, did it? And then the sun came out and it burned it. Well, someone who hears the truth and they're full of joy, but it's not rooted in anything, when things in life are hard or you get disappointed or sad, it's easy for us to forget the truth. And that's what happens when the truth falls among those who don't have their truth rooted in deep places of God's word. What about the thorns? Remember the seed scattered among the thorns? Well, that's like people who hear the truth, but then the things of this world become more important, like their job or their money or friends or stuff. And it gets choked out. What about the people who hear the word and their hearts are like soil? Well, then it roots down deep. And you remember the truth about who God is in the kingdom and what he says is true about who you are. We want to be people who hear the stories of Jesus, just like at KidCityFX or at church or in the Bible that you read. You want to hear the truth, and you want your heart to just be like the soil. You don't want to hear truth and be like the one who the seed falls among the rocks, right? Get excited and then forget. Or hear it and think about other things like the thorns. You want to hear it and you want that truth to stay. You want it to take root. Now, it might seem like I am responsible to make sure you have a heart that is soil, right? But I'm not. And it might seem like your parents, because they're your parents, are in charge of you having dirt, like soil for your heart, ears that hear, but they're not. They can do it with you, and we should all learn together always. But it's you. You're big. And you can pray on your own, God, give me a heart of soil, that when I would hear your word, it would stay. I have 3 little boys, and it is a pleasure to teach the Bible to my 3 little boys. But it's their responsibility to hear the words of truth, to ask the questions that they don't understand, to learn more, to read their Bible, to pray. And you can do it too. We are each responsible for the soil in our hearts, right? If our hearts are like a garden, we want our heart to be like the soft soil. You don't plant seeds in tough, packed dirt. It has to be soft and you till it, right? You use a tool and you till the soil and you plant the seed. Well, we each have to till the soil in our own hearts, and we do that by talking to God, by praying, by loving each other well, by reading God's word, his truth. I know it's a big book and sometimes it's hard to know where to start, but you can ask mom or dad or another adult, a sister or a brother to read with you. We learn together, right? We learn together. We are going to pray and we are going to ask God to make our hearts soft, that we would be like those who hear, receive, and the truth roots down deep, just like cucumbers and tomatoes and all the things we pictured in our garden. So, you know the drill. I want you to clasp your hands. I want you to set them on your lap. I want you to be very, very still. I want you to be quiet, and I want you to close your eyes. Because when we talk to the God of the universe, the one who put the moon in the sky and dug out the oceans, we want to be quiet and still. It honors him and it honors the one who prays. So close your eyes, get ready. Let's pray. God, thank you so much that we learn from your word, that we learn from your stories. Thank you for parables. Thank you that you take big kingdom ideas and help us to understand them. God, I ask for everyone who hears this message that our hearts would be like soft soil, ready for the seeds of your truth to be planted and take root. We want to know you more. I pray you set a craving deep in our hearts to run after you, to learn more things and truth about who you are. Thank you, thank you, thank you for your word. We love you, God. We pray this in your name. Amen.
Hey, families. This is the part of our family experience where we hide God's word in our heart by learning our memory verse. And this week, I've got two friends to help me, Pastor Matt Beretta and our illustrious worship leader here at Franklin, John Reddick. They are going to help us with this memory verse, and this is the beginning of a new set of memory verses for us. We've been learning Hebrews 4:12 this whole time, and now we are going to be moving to John 3:16 and 17. So we're going to learn the first part of it today. You probably know John 3:16. A lot of people do, but to help us remember, we're just going to put motions with it, right? Y'all feel good about that?
Let's do it.
I'll do it first, and you can repeat after me so you get a little bit comfortable, okay? So we're going to say, for God.
Do we do it now?
Do it now.
For God.
Right. For God, because this is the sign language for God. So we'll just say, for God.
For God.
Then we'll say, so loved.
So loved.
Then we'll say, the world.
The world.
And it's big because God didn't just love the world. He loved the whole wide world. And that's as far as we're going to go today. So you think we got, let's try it one more time slow.
I think so.
And you can repeat after me. Then we're going to do it together, okay? All right, families, everybody get ready. Now, guys,
Just
we
stretch
shake
out?
it off.
Shake it off?
We shake it out. There we go.
We do vocal exercises too?
You certainly can. Would you like to do that? No.
Save it for
I don't
next
think
week.
John needs to do vocal exercises. He's way better than both of us. So we'll try to keep up, okay? So from the top, here we go. For God.
For God.
So loved.
So loved.
The world.
The world.
Nice. Then we're going to say John 3:16 and 17.
John 3:16 and 17.
Because we will put the rest of it together in the coming weeks. Now, Can we do it together without you repeating after me? You think we got it?
Is there like words I can look at?
There's not, but it shouldn't be too hard to remember. Everybody at home's remembering too, okay?
Okay, all right.
Here we go from the top. 1, 2, 3. For
God
so loved the world. John 3:16 and 17. Yes, air high five, John. Air high five, Matt. Woo. Nice. Families, thank you so much for joining us for another family experience. We can't wait to see you next week.